A friend of mine recently admonished me for, quote unquote, encouraging certain types of guys to go geomax. And I thought it might be prudent and a useful exercise to make a video as to why you should not geomax on principle and list out all the reasons. That said, he and I have talked about this, and I think he made his point clear, and there are no hard feelings. But for the record, I have never explicitly on this channel, on the several occasions I have talked about geomaxing, said, you should geomax. I've always listed it as an option. However, all that said, I do think geomaxing is a pretty bad option, all things considered, for most men. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to talk about all the reasons why geomaxing probably isn't a good idea. And as if to highlight my bona fides, I have lived in 8 countries. I spent most of my life abroad, and I've been around the bend. So I know what it's like to live in a foreign environment, and hopefully that gives me some insight here. But the number one reason why geomaxing is a really, really bad idea, I think, is because typically the guys who are being encouraged to geomax are the type of guys who probably, in terms of their personality, in terms of other factors, are not the type of guys who are easily going to come out of their shell to begin with, which is to say they're not the trailblazing adventurous types. And a lot of the problems that they might have at home concerning acquisition of females might recur when they're abroad in a different country. So take, for example, some guy who is short, not very attractive, socially awkward, maybe fat, and you say, well, you could do the work, lose the weight, let's say he loses the weight, but all these other factors are still there, right? And you say, well, go geomax, go abroad, go to Thailand, go to Colombia, go to Peru, whatever. Well, wherever you go, and this is a lesson I've learned throughout my life, much to my chagrin, wherever you go, you take yourself with you, which is to say, the problems that you have, the internal, emotional, mental problems that you bear within yourself, you will take them with you. And so somebody who's mentally and emotionally scarred from years, if not decades, of, say, rejection and just lack of success in general, either in life or in specific with women. So in a sense, there's a certain phenotype that this is being recommended to, often fairly frequently, coming from certain individuals in the manosphere, the broader manosphere. And that phenotype might not be appropriate at all for thriving in that kind of geomaxing environment. And for the record, a lot of people who do talk about geomaxing are very young men in their early 20s who are obsessed with looks maxing. They've hardly traveled abroad, let alone lived abroad in a foreign environment, so they don't really know much about that. So again, yeah, that might be the first thing I would say. There's a phenotype out there that unfortunately is often being told it should go geomax. I do list as an option sometimes, sure, for men who really want to go out on a limb, but a lot of these guys are going to be just as unsuccessful in these new places, if only for that reason. Now, some of them might have a little more success, but again, to put the nail in the coffin on this particular aspect of things, I would say that if a guy is socially awkward, introverted, not really the type of guy to get out of his skin and even get out of his house and talk to people, if you have that type of guy, right, you say, oh, go geomax, and you plop him down in the middle of some foreign country, a country that speaks a completely different language with a very different culture, and I'm going to get to that in a bit. Do you really think he's going to do well with that? Probably not. There are certain types of extroverted guys who, for a variety of reasons, have had middling success with women and earn decently, etc., etc. Those are the types of guys that you see geomaxing and actually do a halfway decent job of it, which is to say they go out there and they're getting the punani, they're finding hookups, and in some cases they actually find so-called partners and wives. In that case, yeah, that's kind of an exception more than the rule, because these guys are probably extroverted anyway, and precisely that kind of phenotype of man is also the type of guy who, say, in an American or a British context, knows that he probably could hook up and do all these things in his native country, albeit with somewhat less success, but there's an issue, namely things like divorce court, restrictions, accusations of carnal harassment, etc., etc. And so these are the type of guys that are probably a little bit older, more experience. They actually have experience with women, and so they try it out, and some of them have some success. But for most guys, on these grounds alone, probably not a thing to recommend, geomaxing. And now we come to the meat and bones of geomaxing and why it is so damn difficult living abroad in a foreign country and actually thriving in that environment. I'm not talking about surviving, right? But thriving and doing well. Because look, most people these days, especially with English, can get around more or less and quote unquote survive. That's not the same thing as doing well and thriving and really, really integrating in that environment, which is key if you want to have all the success that you'd like to have. And I'm not just talking about things related to women, but also knowing the ins and outs of the culture, above all the language. I'll get to that in a bit. And just getting to know people. You need to make connections. You need to find connections with people that are going to be able to help you get through the day and get through life there. Key to understanding and navigating any foreign environment is the foreign language that is spoken in said foreign environment. And I don't mean this as an insult, but most Anglophones, people from the United States, Australia, the UK, Canada, etc., only speak English. And yes, you can get by in most places these days with English. Say as a tourist, you could just go to a hotel, negotiate, whatever. If you're talking about seriously settling down or spending years in a place, then it's integral that you learn the language. Now, a lot of people don't get this because they don't have a lot of experience with foreign languages, but there is no easy foreign language. Once you're an adult, it's hard. It's hard to acquire a foreign language. And I'm not just talking about the high school equivalent, because that doesn't mean jack squat. I'm talking about getting to a level of proficiency where you really understand all the important bits. I'll make the claim most people can't do that. And the reason why you absolutely, not just ideally, need to get to a very high level of proficiency in the respective language there is because it's the key to navigating the culture and taking command of your own life there. If you don't know the language locally, you will be taken advantage of. If you don't know the language, people will run circles around you. That's particularly true of third world countries. In third world countries, where there's a lot of corruption, a lot of people who are very willing to manipulate you and bilk you out of your money and your time, that's really where the rubber meets the road on these things. So I'm not talking about language in this context as a language aficionado. I am a language aficionado. I'm talking about it as a survival tool and the necessity to get those language skills to an absolute peak level so nobody can screw you over and rip you off, and so you can navigate your life in whatever country. A lot of people say, well, maybe it doesn't really matter. You know how many times I've seen guys who've ended up marrying foreign wives and hooking up with foreign women completely lost because either their Thai, their Vietnamese, or even their Spanish was just kind of okay to order some things, but not much beyond that. And I've seen it a dozen times in my life. It does not work. And again, people say, well, Spanish is a really easy language. No, it's not. There's no foreign language that's easy if you want to get it to a very, very high level. And you're going to need to if you actually want to thrive and do well in that local culture. And you want to make sure, because any relationship with a woman is potentially adversarial, that you can communicate very efficiently with her and you understand everything that's going on, especially when it involves her relatives, especially when it involves the authorities, things like taxes, things like the police, etc., etc. You need to know what's going on there. And if all you have is a mediocre understanding of the language and command of it, then you will be screwed. I've seen it happen a million times. So this is a big prohibitive factor. Sure, if you just want to spend a couple weeks or months somewhere getting your rocks off, it's possible to just circumvent that. But even there, I would say, not a great idea, especially if you're very serious with geomaxing. You're done with the US, you're done with Canada, you're done with the UK, whatever. You want to go someplace. Okay, think about this. It's really important that you can achieve a very, very high proficiency in the language so nobody can screw you over. Because at the end of the day, you'll probably be pinned as a foreigner regardless, right? Especially if you're some pasty white guy from the West. Okay, you head on over these countries, they're going to know you're a foreigner. But the assumption there, precisely because they see a pasty white guy, is that you're just an idiot to be taken advantage of. But If you know the language really well, they cannot screw you over. Now, I could also run my mouth off about the benefits of speaking a foreign language at a high proficiency and how it opens up doors, and indeed it does. And that's the whole point. You get to know the locals, make connections, and you will understand them, and they will be more inclined towards you. They might even start viewing you as simpatico, which is a good thing. I'm not talking about women here, but just people. You might get on friendly terms with some of the men there, etc., etc. So yes, if you're going to go someplace, whatever that country is, particularly a third world country, make sure you master that language as best as you can. It will be the number one key to your success there, I guarantee it. Now we come to the cultural aspects. The cultural aspects, again, are intimately tied to the linguistic aspects. But yeah, even if you do master the language, there's still going to be weird things done in that culture that you're not used to, you're not familiar with. And you need to brace yourself for it. And if you reject that, you're going to be able to navigate that culture a lot less, and it's going to be insufficient. So any place you go to, things will be run differently. And perhaps the biggest thing I would say, apart from strange customs in certain countries where you bow or whatever, is in particular in third world countries, meaning throughout Latin America, throughout Southeast Asia, there is a lot of corruption. You'll not only be haggling for things at the market, you'll be haggling for things in life, and you need to be prepared for things not being done in a quote-unquote squeaky clean way, the way you might expect it in the West. Because, like I said, corruption. I've seen it many times in different countries, talked to lots of guys, how the police's palms had to be greased in order to do X, Y, Z, take your pick. That's something you really need to prepare for. And that adds a lot of environmental stress. You can't just assume things are going to be okay. I mean, give you a random example. The other day, I was in a queue in a supermarket, and some dude left his wallet there a couple hours before, and the cashiers, the people, they kept it there. He came back and gave it back to him. Now, this isn't a Western European country, obviously. So that level of trust is still there. That level of safety is there. Do you think that's going to happen in a place like Colombia or Thailand or Panama? I don't think so. So you need to be on your toes. You need to keep your wits about you, because these places are very corrupt, and they're also really dangerous. There's sometimes scams, ongoing scams that get men involved, hopeful men, in situations, Ponzi schemes, and sometimes in the worst case scenario, these men are even slain, which is to say they're taken advantage of, they are off, not super common, but it does happen. And you don't want to be in a situation like this, which kind of goes back to my original point, right? Geomaxing sounds like a nifty idea when you're watching a looks-maxing video about your options of how you can acquire a female. But yeah, there's a lot of BS to deal with, a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles. You might think wherever you live kind of sucks. Imagine a place where you barely understand the language, nobody understands you, you don't know how to get by, you don't understand the system, the customs, the culture, and then you get blindsided by some kind of weird accusation and you have no idea what's going on, what they're saying, why they're saying it. Imagine that. These things happen abroad, especially to expats who do not have a robust understanding of the language and culture. Finally, the relationship itself, right? Again, all of that takes into account previous factors. You don't know the language, it's going to be really, really difficult to conduct a relationship. Yeah, the ooga booga stuff, I'm sure you can bang her. She'll give you the sucky wucky, but you can't do that 24 hours a day. You need to communicate, you need to make yourself understood, and it's bad enough between a woman and a man when they speak the same language. Imagine what it's like when the same language is not being spoken. And then amplify those communication difficulties by 1,000-fold for that reason. So in summary, I think geomaxing for most men is actually a really, really bad idea. Because A, of reasons of personality, they're not the type. Even if they are the type, they're probably not going to be willing to put in the work to learn the local language and adapt to the culture to make sure that they're doing really well in that environment, to make sure that they're safe, etc., etc. There's one really good example from years ago that I brought up many times on this channel. This was maybe 12 years ago now. This guy who grew up in California, conservative guy, not necessarily religious, but pretty conservative, right? And I guess he saw the writing on the wall, so to speak. And so he realized that him wanting a family and a wife in a traditional manner, that probably would not be obtainable in the dysfunctional states of America, and on top of that, in California, which is ground zero for dysfunction. So what did he do? He left for the Philippines. Oh, lots of people do that. And yeah, English is technically an official language there. What did he do? He went to some bumhole village out in the middle of nowhere, studied and mastered Tagalog, which is the local language that's spoken in the Philippines. And he settled down with a woman, started his own business with the yokels locally in that language. And this was eons ago, but I think he had popped out at least 2 kids, maybe even 3 kids by then. And he had not left since. And I remember communication trailed off after a while. I remember him saying that he never, ever took his wife to California when he was visiting his family from back in the States for obvious reasons. Didn't want the corruption. But this guy really did his homework, because think about it. He abandoned his own culture, everything that he did enjoy about it, for something completely alien, a lower standard of living, busted his butt learning Tagalog. And Tagalog, certainly for an English speaker, is an incredibly difficult language to master and even learn a little bit. And he just made a new life for himself. How many people are willing to do that? To abandon everything they have in the country they grew up in, the connections, the familiarity, all that stuff, for this one little pipe dream. And oftentimes it doesn't work out regardless, even if you do all the right things and take the right steps. This guy was an exception, not the rule. And exceptions prove the rule. If you just want to get your rocks off for a week or two, yeah, why not? But if you're seriously considering geomaxing as a quote-unquote lifestyle in order to get a wife, a long-term partner, to change your life fundamentally, then everything I've talked about in this video will apply. And you need to make sure if you're the right person for that. Are you willing to abandon it all, to haul buttocks, learning the local language, to deal with the yokels? Are you extroverted enough? Can you get out of your own shell and skin? All these are relevant questions. And for this reason, I think for most men, the vast majority of men even, geomaxing is just not really a good option. So to my friend, I hope that I've allayed your fears, even though we did talk about this privately. But I think we're in a better spot now, since you know exactly what my position is, as expounded in this video. And to everyone else, the usual. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. May the gods shower fortune upon you. Until the next time, take care. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.